Good afternoon. Everyone can hear me. Can you hear me in the back? I see hands in the back. That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the German Pavilion at COP27. I'm Jennifer Morgan. I'm the State Secretary and Special Envoy for International Climate Action in the Foreign Office of Germany. And this pavilion for us is a very special and important place. It's a place and a space that we are welcoming and opening to make sure that there's a diverse set of voices that are heard, and particularly those that might otherwise go unheard. And this is an understanding that we share with our close partners, the Netherlands and Sweden. So I'm just really happy to welcome on the stage with me my fellow Chief Climate Negotiator, Mr. Jamie de Bonbon de Parme from the Netherlands, and Matthias Frumarie from Sweden. And today we're also going to be joined virtually, so welcoming and hoping, I'm looking for a thumbs up from those of you in Cairo. Can you hear me? Oh, this is brilliant.
Hear you well. Connection is standing. Huh?
Excellent. So we have three key civil society actors from Cairo with us to learn more about the conditions for just climate change. And before I ask them to all introduce themselves, I just wanted to outline why this side event and this conversation really is so important to us. For Germany, civil society plays a central role in the success of, I would say, any COP, but any efforts around climate justice, including COP27. And I think the nexus between climate and human rights, well, it begins with freedom of expression and freedom of the press. And without uncensored media, the general public, it just cannot inform itself. And we need the general public to have the facts at hand so that they can also be part of the solution. So I think the discourse on climate, the climate crisis, it can't come in full bloom, in full dialogue without those voices, without the freedom of press and the freedom of assembly. And I think that is the case with tackling the climate crisis. Without a pluralistic civil society that can act without fear of reprisals, we cannot achieve our climate goals. And there needs to be a just strategy for dealing with climate change that this is a very important part of our climate foreign policy and our feminist foreign policy that really takes into account the special needs of all marginalized groups. And I think for that to happen, their voices must be heard, and it must be allowed genuine participation in the negotiations, also here at the COP. So those critical voices, I think, they move us forward. We need those voices in our societal debates in order to make sure that we are thinking about things, that we can benefit from their experience, that they challenge us. That is part of why, in this moment of a climate crisis, they are more important than ever. And as such, human rights are just inextricably linked to the fight against climate change. And I look forward to exploring this nexus today, and I want to hand over the floor to Jamie.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to echo what you say. I think this COP, or any COP, is a global COP to deal with the climate issues, and it touches everybody. I've been speaking to indigenous peoples, to the private sector, but we have also seen that globally the most effective climate policies are developed if there's an open society. If there is a dialogue with the people that can tell you what are the issues that I'm fighting with, and what solutions do I have to bring? And for instance, I spoke to Bangladesh as well, and said, "Why are you such a champion on adaptation?" Said, "Because we've got a vibrant civil society. Sometimes they're still facing problems with local authorities, but nobody is fearing to end up in jail for speaking out. So they get into trouble, but it's not going to be limiting, and they still feel that the next day they can go out again." And that means that the local government and the central government have completely been pushed to really push adaptation forward. There have been other countries in the region that have been hit by climate disasters that were not as effective in climate action, and they have literally not implemented anything that they could have done because nobody was listening to the people that were in harm's way. And so that's why I say this is such an important place to really listen to the people. And I'm very happy to be in contact with Cairo, but as we've been with many other people around the world, to give them a voice and to listen to them.
Yeah, Matthias.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks. Such a great, so great to be with you this afternoon. My name is Matthias Frumid, I'm Swedish chief negotiator, and I think we would share very much the approach which Dutch and German colleagues have outlined. And I think we do that on the basis of the kind of approach which we would take nationally. I mean, our legislative processes would be as participatory as we can, sort of based on consultations with various types of civil society actors before moving to actual legislation and sort of decisions that are taken by parliament, by government. So sort of embodying that kind of participatory approach is something which we want to explore and ensure here also within the COPs. And I think one reflection we've made as well is that the more participatory and open processes you would have in your societies, the more prone you would also be to accelerating climate action in your country. So the more voices that can be heard to be participating in the design of your climate policies, the more ambitious you would be. And of course, that is something which we all need to accelerate the kind of action which we're seeing in so many countries, but which sort of needs to be more sort of at the forefront of all countries exploring their climate action, ensuring that all countries and all voices are heard in designing and implementing your policy. So really a pleasure to be with you today to explore these themes further.
Thanks very much. Now it's time to head to Cairo. Ambassador Hartmann, over to you.
Yes, we are here. I hope you can hear us well. Frank
Yes.
Hartmann, German ambassador to Egypt. We are very happy that we can engage in this platform here because we all agree, as you said, from Sharm El-Sheikh, civil society is an integral part of the COP. It is one of the three pillars. It's government, it's civil society, it's also private sector. And we all know, I think, that without civil society engagement for decades, there would not have been any climate action today. That's very important to memorize. And that only works, as you said, with the freedom of expression, the freedom of the press, and human rights are a prerequisite for that. Yeah? Therefore, we are very happy today to have three guests from Egypt who would have liked to travel and to be at COP in Sharm El-Sheikh, but this was not possible. So we are happy that we can give you some space here to express your views. And I would quickly introduce you. We're having to my left Mohamed Lotfi, the founder and director of the Egyptian Commission of Rights and Freedoms, which you established in 2013. And you received the German-French Human Rights Award in 2018. And we have Nada Nashat, who is a women's rights expert of SEVLA, the Center for Egyptian Women's Legal Assistance, which provides legal assistance for victims of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and gender-based violence. And to the far left, we have Mohamed Zawi, Cairo head of the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies, the CHRS, an expert on human rights analysis. He himself is suffering from a travel ban and asset freeze, as many others of human rights defenders in Egypt. So you will start with your questions. I think Jennifer Morgan first to Mohamed Lotfi.
Thanks so much, and thanks to the three of you for being with us. Even virtually, it's excellent and wonderful to have you here. Mohamed Lotfi, I mean, I think just maybe starting quite high level as to why are human rights important to climate change and climate action and response? Over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is a very important question. You know, I started my career back 20 years ago when economic and social and cultural rights and civil and political rights were presented as two different sets of rights. And we were looking at how those two sets of rights, those two covenants from the UN from 1966, do actually play together. And we are now in 2022 asking ourselves as a very similar question of how does the whole set of human rights under the Universal Declaration for Human Rights play together with the issue of environment and climate change. We have to start with a premise that active participation in forging policies that affect our planet and climate in our countries, each country of ours and at the planetary level, active participation by especially the affected communities that are the most affected by desertification, rising sea levels, salinity of lands. These communities have solutions in mind. They know their problems, they know the challenges, and they have answers. They must be allowed to freely form associations, freely speak to a free media, to tell their stories and tell researchers, free academics, who can go and study and find the right data to actually write or advise or provide the right advice, expert advice or technical advice to the policymakers. They must be represented, those communities, and everybody affected, everybody by climate change must be able to fully participate in free and fair elections, in making public decisions. And that's true if it's a representative system, that would be through free, fair elections in parliament. So free press, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and freedom to participate in public affairs. These are very much civic and political rights. If they are not guaranteed, then affected communities and affected populations by climate change, and that's pretty much everybody indeed, would not be able to provide the solutions and have their voices heard to enjoy economic and social and cultural rights. That goes for indigenous people, that goes for people living on the shores of the sea, fishermen, farmers, and this is a large portion of the Egyptian population. Unfortunately, in Egypt, we are not at the stage where people enjoy freedom of expression or enjoy freedom of assembly or association or even political participation. And therefore, Egyptians who will be affected by climate change are unable to express their issues and the challenges that they face as communities to be able to participate in this important debate on climate change.
No, thank you very much. You kind of went in a bit onto the nexus that here between the two in Egypt. I'm wondering if you could go maybe even a bit deeper in that, because I think that nexus is so important in what the situation is here.
Oh, yeah, you know, we have been fighting back repressive policies by the Egyptian government for the pretty much past 30 years, 40 years. I mean, everything I can remember is repression of freedom of expression, of association, of assembly. We have vivid memories of people dying in Egyptian streets because they have protested. Some peacefully, some non-peacefully, but lethal force has been used against Egyptian protesters at many occasions and in an unjustified way. We have the issue of climate change also requires, or addressing the issue of climate change does also require an independent judiciary, so that communities are able to go and litigate collectively against big polluters, against practices by industries that are harming the environment and their livelihoods too. And I fear at the levels of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, association, independence of the judiciary, political participation, Egypt is lacking far behind even its neighbors and countries from the African continent. And that's a shame, because Egypt is one of the largest countries in Africa, one of the mostly dense populated countries around the Nile Valley, this historical and mythical river. Communities living around it are not able in Egypt to associate and speak to defend the Nile and the Nile Delta. I'm very, very sorry to say that today Egypt is hosting COP27. This is a sort of parenthesis where we are able to get the cameras and the media around important issues such as political prisoners. I was very proud of the German Pavilion to host Sanaa Seif a couple of days ago. She was speaking freely. This is a parenthesis, a small period that will end in a week time, where Egyptians are freely able to express their views and opinions and bring up the cases of their loved ones in prison, like Ala Abdel Fattah, who should be released, and so many others. We fear that after COP is gone, when everybody's away, when the cameras are gone, of the repercussions of this participation. But we continue our fight. We have seen worse days in terms of human rights in Egypt. and our commitment is to human rights in Egypt and to the rights of Egyptians, whether it's economic, social, cultural, political, civil rights, and the right to participate in the debate on climate change will not be moved by any repressive measures in the future.
Thanks very much. And I have one more question for you before handing over, but I also just want to let you know that Germany will be coming back after the COP with a delegation. We very much want to just observe and see what's happening here afterwards with our human rights representatives. So just to share that with you all here. I know, and we've been also following carefully the national dialogue that Egypt is currently preparing, and wondering how could it be a useful process for greater inclusivity in civil society in the climate debate. Suggestions there?
Well, the national dialogue is a very important milestone in the development in Egypt for political participation and the inclusiveness of different voices from opposition, from government, technocrats, etc. Unfortunately, so far as we know, the national dialogue, for example, does not include a committee that has to do with environment, for example. So the debate around environment is not even on the table as part of the national dialogue. Of course, you can tell me, well, it can be included in different, committees under the economic, axis of the debate or the dialogue. Or even in the social one, but it's not one that's there. There's no committee there for experts and opinion leaders to bring up the issue of environment or climate change. So this is a missed opportunity to actually participate through the national dialogue. The national dialogue hasn't started yet, 6 months after the president has called for a national dialogue. My understanding is that national dialogues are by nature a platform for turning the page of the past. It's a transitional period. Countries that go through transition periods hold such national dialogue. And I hope this is genuine. I hope this is genuine because it would mean turning the page of the past and opening a new page. And by turning the page of the past, you mean closing down all the repressive or stopping all the repressive measures that has been the hallmark of this government for the past 9 years. That would mean unblocking websites that are still blocked, releasing all political prisoners, including there's Alaa lawyer, Muhammad al-Bakr, who's in the same case. Both were tried by an emergency court. That's an unfair trial by nature, by a special court that does not allow for appeal, that does not allow for so many other fair trial guarantees that are enshrined in the Egyptian constitution and the Egyptian normal laws. So the national dialogue, a lot of people have put conditions to participate on it. We are part of these conditions that the government has to show that it is serious about it. By showing it's serious, it will only show that it's serious about it once it's released thousands and thousands and thousands of political prisoners in Egypt, to give the impression to the Egyptians that there is a new page that's being opened there, that people are free to participate and speak out their minds without fear of reprisal. That has not happened up until now, and therefore the trust that the national dialogue will deliver is still not there.
Okay. Sounds like a place that there could be progress, and let's work for that and hope for that. Maybe I'll turn to Matthias. I don't know when you have to go. Oh,
maybe Jaime first.
Go to Jaime. Okay, you have enough time. Jaime, over to you. Thank you, Mohammed. I'll hand it over to Jaime.
No, thank you very much. And I'll focus on a particular large part of the population, women and climate. I think that's an important area as well. If I look from a global perspective as a climate envoy, I look at the globe and then I zoom in specific countries. But global perspective, you see that women are 14 times more likely to die from climate disasters than men. It's not 14% more, it's 14 times more. And that has to do with security, health, mobility, and many, many other issues. And that came out in a report of CARE International. And 4 million girls are unable to complete their education due to the impact of climate change. And that came out of a report from the Malala Fund. And women are often left out of the decision making and obviously should be part of the solutions. Again, listening to the people of concern, that's where you get also the possibilities of finding solutions. My question to you, Nada, and it's wonderful to be in contact with you as well, is there a conversation on gender and climate in Egypt?
Thank you so much for having me. So yes, just to start with an overview, it is why women's rights are important in the discussion about climate change, how this is linked. The majority of the poor communities are women per se, and the majority of the most affected by the climate change are women in this sense as well. Women are more vulnerable to violence because of internal migration due to climate change issues and crisis. They are more, given the fact that there is still a huge discrepancy between men and women, whether in the workplace or in the workforce, the fact that women are earning less money than men for the same job, it's also causing much more problems for women in order to be able to escape the violence they are enduring, or that they can find other alternatives, especially when crises like climate change happens. For instance, in Egypt, I believe there is this the national strategy for climate change 2050, and although it sounds like a promising strategy, but the problem with this strategy is that it didn't mention the health effects. Really, it didn't have a sector or a section on health effects. It was very brief, no specific goals in that sense, in comparison, of course, to the national strategy of adaptation that was issued in 2011. There is a huge discrepancy between the two. And this actually raises the question of, are we really serious about the effects of the climate change on women's health in this sense? Because it requires a lot of money in order to train the health sector, for example, build hospitals, or even have the health centers in the villages, for example. Also, on the other hand, in Egypt, I believe women farmers are 40% of the workforce in agriculture. Unfortunately, they are not covered by the labor law. The labor law discriminates against women in agriculture by saying that this law covers everyone who works in all spaces except for two categories: female farmers, because male farmers are covered by the law, female farmers are not, and domestic workers. And for female farmers, we're talking about, again, 40% of the workforce in this field. 30% of women low wages are coming from agriculture sector. So again, the question is, where are the national efforts to lift the violations that are put on these women specifically? Because these women, especially in rural areas and in villages, they are more vulnerable to violence, they are more vulnerable to poverty, they are more vulnerable to other health issues in that sense.
I might have a follow-up question, Nada. I had a discussion earlier today with also online with a woman from India, Bangalore, and she said that she is organizing women amongst themselves, to educate women on the effects of climate, and very often women are not aware in her environment about climate, the sensitivities, and what you can do about it. So what initiative do you see in Egypt, bottom up? You were talking about top-down initiatives that need to be there from the government perspective, but what bottom-up civil society initiatives are there in Egypt that help women adapt to climate change?
I know that there are some attempts that run bottom up, whether in villages and in centers, but again, with the closed space for NGOs, for civil society organizations, it's extremely hard to do this raising awareness sessions. According to the new, to the NGO law that I know, I'm sure Zaira is going to talk about, but it's to do in-field visits, for example, or to do research, or to do raising awareness campaigns on such issues. This requires a lot of security permissions in order to be able to conduct such work. So the only option is that people need to come together somehow and work on the issues in the villages, in the agricultural sector, and the other sections as well. This specific action would be very limited if the space is not opened up for everyone to work on the ground. And that's why we're always working or pressing on the fact that opening of the civil space is not only about the civil or political rights, it is a cultural right, it is a human right, because it affects several other sectors, climate change including.
Thank you very much. It's both a right and it's an effective means for what I said earlier, good policy and a functioning society. Thank you very much, Nada.
Should we turn to? I'll be turning then to Mohammed Sarid. Thanks so much for being with us this afternoon, and focusing again on sort of the rights of and the possibilities for civil society to be part of climate action. I mean, just from a Swedish perspective, civil society voices keep us on our toes, and rightly so, in developing our own climate policy. So how would you see the role of civil society in climate action generally?
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting us. I agree with you that the role of civil society is very crucial for climate change and climate actions. There is a lot of issues that the civil society can do, like first mobilizing people against specific policies to be changed that include public speaking, and this is including definitely the right to protest, and also advocate with the government and advocate with the international partners regarding changing some climate policies, and definitely pressuring the government in order to change their policies. This is definitely one of the most important rules is the oversight of the expenditure of projects that have been, and the implementation of projects regarding and how it respects the climate. Unfortunately, that this is not possible in Egypt at all. Due a lot of constraints and a lot of obstacles that are facing the civil society in Egypt. First of all, it's the new NGO law. For example, in the new NGO law, and I'm setting a very, very simple example. In order to, if you are a charity organization or organizations that are working on microfinance and you want to participate in environmental initiative, you have to get approval to add an activity. And this approval, you may get it and you may not get it. So you are not free as an NGO. You are not free to work on the environment. If you are registered as a charity organization or as a microfinancing organization, in order to add another activity, which is environmental activities, you have to obtain approval. The work of civil society, according to the NGO law, is putting the NGOs under severe scrutiny all the time, and every step you have to get approval before it. This NGO is not encouraging the civil society to participate in shaping the policies of environment and climate change, climate policies, and on the same time, the government is looking, and this law actually interprets this, looking to the NGOs as necessary evil that should be constrained by several laws. This is not the only thing, the NGO law, but also there is the legal harassment. And as His Excellency, as Ambassador of Germany, said that I'm under travel ban. I am not an isolated case, but there is a lot of colleagues that are still under travel ban due to the foreign funding case, which is the infamous case 173 for the year 2011, which started from 2011 and is still affected by it. Most of us are been 6 years under travel bans, and we cannot travel. And definitely, most of us have primary charges that if we proved guilty in front of the court later on, it could put us behind bars for life sentence. But also there is illegal practices, like what's happened for some of our colleagues, like for example, Gamal, my colleagues, when he had been harassed in the streets by secret police and has been painted by paints, and his car has been stolen and has been beaten in the streets because of his activities. Also, there is another laws like counter-terrorism laws that actually hinder our work. That it simply could lead us that we could be labeled as a terrorist organizations. So unfortunately, though all of this is hindering us as a human rights organization to participate in this, in changing climate policies or in adding to climate policies. Definitely, open society and freedom of association is very crucial pillar for climate policies and affecting climate policies.
Thanks so much for sharing those examples. And I think you made some very good points on sort of the role of civil society there, and also quite some concerning points when it comes to participation more generally. What do you think would be the lessons that we could learn jointly and looking ahead to the next COP? You know, what would you want to see in terms of participation for the next COP?
I think that freedom of association and the participation of civil society is prerequisite for any next COP, and to try to pressure the government before any kind of government, especially those authoritarian governments that we are living under, is to freeze the spaces not during COP but after COP, and also guarantee that there will not be reprisal or retaliation afterwards after the attention of COP ended here. So this is something which is very, very, very important. The follow-up of the respective government and international community regarding what's happening after COP is very important. Also, there should be a lot of demands. For example, I hope that one of the demands that could be made and insisted of before COP is ending Case 173 to guarantee that there is a space for the civil society to shape the policies of climate actions and climate policies. This is something that it should be prerequisite before any.
And what about the role of, if you're looking to other countries as well, and your potential collaboration with civil society organizations in other countries, do you see that as a potential pathway to increasing also civil society participation globally and in sort of enhancing those kind of voices in climate action?
Yes, this is very important. And as I said before, that unfortunately we don't exercise here in Egypt. Unfortunately, that we don't have access to parliament, for example. So there is no hearing session, at least for the human rights organizations. And if there is hearing sessions for some environmental organizations, that doesn't mean that there will be change in policy. And there is a certain things that all should be actually enjoyed by civil society around the world in order to change climate policies is mobilizing people. Mobilizing people here in Egypt is dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. So let's forget, or let's not fool ourselves by what's happening in Sharm El-Sheikh right now, as people can protest and as we can speak publicly here. We haven't been doing this for a long time ago. This is maybe, as I recall, it's my first public speaking in many years due to my travel ban. So I don't give public speeches in anywhere around the world, and because there is no venue for public speaking here in Egypt. So this is something which is very important. This is a basic rule for civil society in order to pressure for changing policies. We need to have access to government, to talk with the government. We need to have access to the parliament, to the state institutions in order to change policies, including climate policies. But we don't have this. What the government wants from us actually is to follow their instructions. And if we are going to do this, it will end up that we will be a service provider, which is fine, but we are not going to affect the policies.
Again, thanks so much for sharing those observations. I think you raised points which are useful for us here and Sharm El-Sheikh to bring forward in the conversations.
If I may add just
of course.
one last thing. That since I'm speaking about civil society, I want to pay my high respect to my colleagues, to my fellow Egyptian human rights workers and human rights defenders that are behind bars right now, which is including Mohammed al-Baqir, Izzat Onim, Ibrahim Mitwalli, and Ahmad Amrisha, who are now behind bars because of their war.
Thank you for highlighting that as well in our conversation here today, and again for highlighting these various examples, which provide us also with examples of which we can be reflecting in our conversations here in Sharm El-Sheikh, and of course beyond COP27 as well, looking ahead to COP28 in the various meetings and conversations we'll be having with partners across the world, and highlighting the importance of civil society participation in climate action globally.
Do you want to moderate the Q&A?
I think we have.
I think it's someone else.
Should we move to Q&A?
I think we have the Swedish ambassador Håkan Emsgaard now to the Q&A part. If you would like to start with that, yeah?
Absolutely.
Then maybe later we take a second round in replying, yeah?
Sure thing. Okay, thank you so much for being here. We'll, Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I see that we have a large audience here. We have a limited time for a questions and answers session, which I think is very important because it will give the opportunity to ask questions to our panel in Cairo. But in order to give everybody the chance to ask questions, I would like to encourage you to keep your questions very short. Maybe 1 minute would be a good idea. And please just state your name and ask your question. So we have a microphone somewhere here. Yeah, and we have a hand raised in the middle. Can we manage this? Yes, we can. Microphone, it's on its way.
Hi, my name is Dipti with Friends of the Earth International and Justiça Ambiental, Friends of the Earth Mozambique. What you're describing, thank you so much to the 3 speakers from Cairo who are speaking about the challenges you're facing. We are in solidarity with you, and this isn't happening only in Egypt. This is happening all over Africa. Shrinking civil society space is happening in Mozambique right now, in so many other countries. It looks like these laws are copy-paste from one country to the other, and obviously it's happening because there are resources that fossil fuel companies and others are trying to grab. What can we do to understand what you're going through so that we can prepare for what's coming in our countries and try and stop it?
Thank you very much. Who would like to pick up that question on the Cairo side?
Is it Mohammed Lotfi would take it? Yeah.
Thank you. We are together in the fight for human rights and for turning the tide of climate change. This COP27 is in Africa, and we are proud of that. We are proud that Africans are welcome in Egypt and are able to express solidarity with us as civil society organizations. We can, I think this COP27 has become a baptism of cooperation between 2 almost separate networks of human rights organizations and environmental organizations and climate change organizations. This is a historical moment, I think, where we together find a common language and a common cause. We understand as human rights organizations how important it is that basic freedoms are available to everybody, and that our fight is serving also communities, not just individuals and prisoners, etc. Communities who are affected by climate change. So that should becoming on our priorities. And you guys are also now coming to terms with the idea that human rights and climate justice is not possible without basic freedoms to association and association and expression, all that. So we together, we can now forge an alliance between environmentalists and human rights communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mohammed Zari also has a comment on this question.
To make it short, I think that one of the crucial issues that human rights and basic human rights should not be compromised, whatever the state is passing through. So if there is even a state of emergency, you should fight for the basic rights, and you should do all the time trying to respond to the narrative, to the country or state narrative that we have to repress human rights because we are passing through emergency. This is my very short advice.
And I think Nada would also like to add something to
Yes,
that.
very quickly also and very short, I think that it is important that we push for the grassroots level to be taking part in the decision-making discussions. It's essential that people from marginalized areas and people from marginalized sectors are being heard, because they are the ones who really know what are the challenges on the ground. And we need somehow to push our governments and our local representatives to hear them out. And this is our role, I believe, as civil society, is to buffer the zone between. And that's why our role, our existence is important as well, all over the world, especially in Africa. It is important that we can be like the link between what the government should do and what the marginalized communities would want to say. It's very important that we exist in this.
Thank you, Nada. And further questions, Håkan from Sharm El-Sheikh?
Yes, we have. I see hands in the air.
Hello, I'm Angie. I'm a women's rights activist. I really want to thank you for, you said that the COP in Egypt is very important because it shed the light on the prisoners, the political prisoners. But I really want to ask you, and I hope that you can answer my question. Are you really talking about the same person who called the people to kill the cops in the street? The one who tried them without any courts? The one also who called for killing their families and tortured their children? I really want to ask you, are you defending the right of this person? What about the right of other people who have died? The other people, the families of the people who have died? And also, what's your definition of human? Aren't we all?
Thank you.
Aren't we all human too?
Thank you so much. Maybe we could take another question at the same time. There's a hand. I see somebody in the middle there. Okay. Are there any comments from the Cairo side regarding this?
I think we didn't fully understand the first part of it. To whom the question is addressed, is it more to the foreign governments or is it addressed to the local human rights defenders? But maybe we hear another one and then we try to respond.
Yeah.
Actually, I am asking you all about this. I want you to all answer it because it's really, really important to understand what's your definition about human. We are human too. We need also to have.
Yeah. What is the definition of human rights?
Yeah, there is an answer or the attempt of an answer here from Mohammed Lotfi.
Well, there is so much smearing and misinformation about Ali Abdel Fattah that has no ground in truth, no truth anywhere. Ali Abdel Fattah was convicted of spreading false information undermining national security. The false information is a post on Facebook that he shared. He shared the post about the death of a man under torture in a Cairo high security prison. That's what the court has found. That's what the court says. That's the sentence he is serving by a court sentence by an emergency state security court. That's an unfair trial again for a conviction based on an accusation that's purely freedom of expression. Ala Abdel Fattah should not be even tried for that, let alone being convicted or being mistreated so much for just expressing his views. So smearing doesn't work. Smearing doesn't work. Ala was never convicted or let alone accused of any violence. And if Ala had committed or incited any violence, I think there are enough officers who follow his Twitter account since 2011 or his Facebook account that would have gladly taken this to court. But it didn't happen. So stop smearing Ala. Stop speaking about somebody who was on hunger strike and who might cost him his life. I think we have seen an example of courage by the sister of Ala Abdel Fattah, Sana Saif. And we have also seen examples, blatant examples of cowardice by those who actually doubt the truth about Ala Abdel Fattah's case. Ala Abdel Fattah should be released today before tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, and we will hear also the
Yes, a very brief comment. First of all, just to some facts. Ala Fattah haven't been tried because what these allegations that you just said. Ala Fattah have been tried because spreading false information, not because incitement of violence or anything. This is one thing. The other thing is that he should have enjoyed all of his rights while he is in prison, and he should actually enjoy a free and fair trial. And to make it more clear, yes, I'm talking about Ala Fattah, and yes, I'm talking about tens of thousands of people that are behind bar and have been facing injustice in Egypt.
But Nada would like to add something on that from your perspective.
Yes, from a women's rights perspective, actually, I wanted to add that there is a huge problem that the civil society organizations currently are plagued with NGOs that would claim that they defend rights, while in fact they only serve certain agendas of the regimes per se. Unfortunately, if we're talking about defending women's rights in that sense, let's talk more about laws that combat violence against women that are still in drawers, that has not been discussed up till this moment, and that should have been used in case of inciting violence, or that we're talking about threatening people here and there. The tweet that is being mentioned, it has a certain context that I will not going to defend. It's not my colleagues, I think, already covered it, but it was in 2010. So it was 12 years ago. The fact that up till this moment, there is no one claim, one lady that came forward, and unfortunately, I'm very sad that certain people who would call themselves women's rights activists, they have claimed that they have heard and received complaints about these tweets, and for 12 years, they did not come forward with such accusations. This is a problem, and that's why women are still suffering here, because those who are supposed to defend women's rights are not coming forward, are not taking stands, and are not demanding what is supposed to be demanded. Shaming and naming activists just because they have their own political will or they have their own political agenda should not be on the expense of women's rights. And I believe this is a problem, a huge problem, that we all should have a stand here.
Thank you. Yeah. And I hand over to Håkon again. Any other questions from Sharm El-Sheikh?
Yes, we have another question beside the camera, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle. I'm from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I just had a question regarding your demands for all the ambassadors that are actually here today. Germany is, so Egypt is the biggest arms buyer of Germany, 4.3 billion euros was it last year. And I just wonder, also with our feminist foreign policy, what do you demand from these governments that still actually have these connections to the Egyptian government? And how can we address this issue? Because all these things, militarization, climate justice, human rights, gender, these are all intersected. So maybe you can elaborate on that one more time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Was that a question to the Cairo panel or more to the... Okay. So let's start with turning the question over to Cairo. And what I understood the question: what kind of demands should be asked to governments?
Is it a question to me as an ambassador? I could say a quick word to that if that is the intention. I think we are currently readdressing our policy in the arms export. And that is a big issue which the new coalition, which took over end of last year, is discussing. And when our foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, was here in February, she made it very clear that human rights situation in a country is one of the key conditionality for the arms exports. And you are right, Egypt has been a large recipient country for arms exports, also by our country, also by other countries, but mainly going into naval defense, not going into weapons for domestic apply, police or repressive apply. And this will be readdressed, and there is a new legislation in preparation in my government to exactly formulate the conditionality for arms exports, and stressing much more than in the past the conditionality based on the human rights situation in that country. That is what I could respond to your question. But maybe you have also views on that, the connects between arms exports and human rights.
Definitely, I agree that it's not only should be conditioned, but it's also should be a kind of oversight how those arms have been used, and to make sure that those arms have been used in the way that it should be used against terrorist groups, but not against peaceful dissent. This is the responsibility of the states and the countries that are providing arms to the Egyptian government.
Okay. And any other remarks on this, or shall we hand over back to you for further other questions?
Okay, thank you. Maybe I should say something on behalf of the Swedish government, also responding to the question. We have a couple of years ago, like Germany, also introduced a human rights element into our arms export regulation. And this is now being implemented in the trade with various countries. At the moment, we are not, and for a rather long time, we have not sold any military material to Egypt, but we are, of course, exporting to many other countries in the world. And we have a system for this, which, again, includes the human rights aspect. Okay, we have more questions. Yes, please, on the first row.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the courage that you've shown in sharing your experiences as human rights defenders in Egypt. I'm Shantarao Bariga from Human Rights Watch. You shared that you also risk reprisals once COP27 is over and the international community is no longer in Sharm. Can you share with us what is your message? What steps can be taken to support you in addressing the risks that you will likely face?
Who wants to take this up? One of the Mohammeds, or Mohammed Lotfi?
Welcome to Egypt. We are very glad to see Human Rights Watch on Egyptian soil. I hope you can visit Cairo too. Tonight, we had a situation. We had the representative, an Italian national from the Danish Institute Against Torture, barred from entering Egypt. He had a visa for Egypt, and he had a green zone registration valid to come, to enter Egypt. He was barred and put back on the plane. His name is Giorgio Carocciolo. He is the MENA person at the Danish Institute Against Torture. Egypt needs the international organizations to have access to Egypt, to be able to come. And it's such a shame that such a man, so much dedicated for the cause of fighting torture, a cause that is our cause also in Egypt, that is plagued by torture and by enforced disappearances. We need men like him to come to Egypt, to have access to come to Egypt, to meet with the Egyptian government and raise questions around those important issues of human rights. That's how we build trust between the Egyptian government and the international organizations for human rights and the national organization for human rights and the environmental and climate change organization. Unfortunately, we are not there. Even during the COP27, such an important person is not allowed to access Egypt to contribute to the well-being of Egyptians on the issue of prevention of torture.
Any other remark on that? Not at this point. So handing back to Sharm.
Okay. Do we have more questions?
In the middle.
In Sharm?
Yep.
We are trying to maneuver the microphone around here, so it takes a little while.
Hello. Hello. My name is Iswala. My question is for Lama. I want to ask her what specifically she needs to be modified in the labor law. However, the labor law nowadays is in the parliament. Number two, she said she cannot move in Egyptian governorates. However, she was in Beni Suef a few weeks ago. Number three, what violence against women here? What acts specifically ممكن تكون أنا هكلمك عربي إيه هو؟
Okay.
With my language. No, I will. أنا عايزة أعرف إيه فعل ممكن يحصل للست المصرية مش مجرم في قانون العقوبات المصري أو في أي قانون تاني. هاتي لي حاجة يوئناية تمام جرمت الجرائم الإلكترونية.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank the mic, I can't hear.
Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Could not get this. Maybe you
could get some. I didn't get the last part of the question, unfortunately. I can answer it in English and Arabic if you want to. First of all, my name is Nada, not Lama, and I was not in Beni Suef. I have no idea where you get this information, but I love to get your verification on this. I was never in Beni Suef. It is true that my organization was already conducting some activities, not in Beni Suef as well also. They are in different governorates. Based on certain projects that are approved by the Ministry of Social Solidarity, because we are an accredited organization based in Bula El Dakhlour. That's the first thing. The second thing, yes, there is a law that is currently being looked at by the parliament on the labor issues. Okay, let's talk about the labor issue for a while, or the parliament sometimes. When we talk about women's rights, the fact that some women are still happy with the situation we are in, calling it the best situation, it actually saddens me because no country in the world has reached parity up till this moment. That's number one. Number two, we are still from the labor law, for example, women in agriculture are still banned from being represented by the labor law. They do not have legal access. They do not have legal protection. This should be on the agenda of the parliament. It should be tomorrow should be amended. This is number one. Number two, women in the private sector should be included also by the labor law, because the labor law gives more accreditation and more merit to women in the public sector, which is extremely good. But when it comes to the women in the private sector, it doesn't give them the same rights. And this has been showing during COVID, for example, what happens with mothers who were given some time to work from home in the public sector, but in the private sector, they were forced to go to their companies and go to their offices. This should change as well. More protection should be given to women. That's number two. On the parliament issue, yes, there are still, still some laws that are actually discriminating against women. To name a few, first of all, the personal status law or the family law, where men are giving unilateral rights, a verbal right to divorce their wives. while women have to go to court, for example, in order to obtain the same rights. In court, khula takes 1 year, normal divorce takes 4 years. Alimonies, I'm not going to talk about the alimony because the process itself takes around 2 to 3, it takes around 1 year to get an alimony and then another year to make sure that the alimony is implemented. Bank Nasser does not cash the full amount of alimony, it only cashes 500 Egyptian pounds for the whole family. So when you talk about that women do not have problems in Egypt, it actually makes me ask, which women are you talking about? Are you talking about grassroots women who are not privileged, who cannot access the parliament, who cannot access the government protection by any means? Or are you talking to those who are in office or in decision-making positions, or who have or know some people who can ask them to reach to a certain point or to reach a certain interest, for example? We need to make, when we talk about women's rights, it is a pressing issue. It is a human right. We should all stand in solidarity for all women across the globe. Egyptian women, since we are in Egypt, are in the heart of this. It cannot be compromised. It's not a field that we can negotiate upon. It's not a field that we should compensate or that we should use to gain certain or to have certain political gains. This is a serious matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Nada. Håkon?
Yes, back to Sharm El-Sheikh again. We are approaching the finish line here a little bit, but maybe we have room for 1 or 2 more questions from Sharm. There seems to be all questions have been asked. We have somebody over here on that side.
The first row, the second row.
It takes a little while with the microphone. Sorry about that, but we will get there eventually.
Hello,
Yes,
and
please.
thank you for the panelists, Jenny from Finland. I wanted to return to the positive notes and ask the panelists, maybe in Cairo, how do you see organizing COP27 in Egypt can facilitate and help Egyptian civil society? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Cairo.
This was a question to the panel in Sharm, but if you want to say something on that here, I think both sides will reply as a final round. We start here in Cairo, and then we hand over back to Sharm, to Jennifer and Jamie. Let the lady start first. Nada.
Yes. So the positive notes of, right?
The positive note, what can the COP contribute for civil society in Egypt?
Oh, yes. So I think that it's important that we have this chance, I believe, to talk about the spaces that we can, again, open up, or that we have more open spaces, especially in the grassroots level in villages and in marginalized communities. I believe it's also a point where now there are certain files or certain agendas are being discussed. Something that's actually, I believe it's a positive out of COP that we can work on for the upcoming years, is that we finally put the compensation in the discussions on for the climate change survivors or victims. So I believe all of this is something that it can be a step forward. We will see what will happen really after COP and what can be done later. Hopefully we do not forget women in the middle as usual. So it's important that we keep our gender angle intact as well.
Mohammed Sadi?
Well, I think that the most beneficial thing that we have a venue to speak right now and to participate in public speaking, giving and participating in seminars. However, I know that there is a concern about retaliation of the COP or reprisals against civil society. However, I want to seize the opportunity of these momentum that have been created during COP27 in order to build on later on by the Egyptian civil society with the help and with cooperation with our international human rights organizations and partners.
Thank you.
Well, COP27 in Egypt is beneficial to Egyptian civil society in the sense where, as Sarah said, there are platforms like this one, for which I'm very grateful, to speak to the world, to speak to everybody in Egypt and outside about the difficulties of defending human rights in Egypt. Another thing, I think it's COP in Egypt, that's a statement in itself. It's a statement that Egypt is a country that needs to be open to the world. It's a country at the crossroads of 3 continents. It's a very old country, Egypt, and the Egyptian population is eager to know and learn about those issues and eager to participate in those debates because they are part of the international family and the international community. It's a lesson, I hope, for our officials and government that Egyptians are eager to be part of this world and not isolated from the rest of the international community, be it civil society, media, activists, and officials and all that.
Thank you, Mohammed. And the final remarks from Sharm El-Sheikh.
Any remarks from Sharm on these issues?
Just for us.
Our side.
On the panel.
From our side, yes, please.
No, I mean, I think it's. Thank you, Nada, for sharing all of you for sharing. I think for us, for our feminist foreign policy, I mean, human rights will remain at the core of our relationship to Egypt. I think we know why, as I was saying at the beginning, why it is so fundamental to have open civil society, to have freedom of press, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and I think, you know, looking at what we can be doing is to continue that dialogue, to continue having these spaces, to continue having the Cairo climate talks, and also to continue the conversations with the 3 of you and others in Egyptian civil society long after the COP is over. I have learned a huge amount. I'll continue to listen and to learn and to be a bridge and to continue over these coming weeks. We're not at the end of this COP yet. There's still a lot to do, and there's still someone to be released. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, it's been whether you know whatever in what stance you have and what you believe is true or not. One thing has to be said by the 3 people that we had on the panel today in Cairo. It's that you are very, very courageous, and that you've really been thinking about these things. This is not an underbelly feeling. This is real research of very smart people that have been thinking, and it's worth to listen to people that have been living and thinking and studying issues very well, and it just makes our society much, much more vibrant. So in that sense, I really want to have applause for the panelists on the other side, because whether you agree or not, courage is definitely there, and it's worth listening.
Okay, so thank you very much from our side.
Go ahead.
Håkan?
Thank you, Frank, and I can just echo my colleagues here. I think we had a very good dialogue. We had an opportunity where different voices could be heard, and I think if we have an open society, it's very important that all voices are heard and can be taken into account. And as many of the panelists has underlined on several occasions, this is particularly true on environmental issues, where we need the engagement of the civil society, both in Egypt and in our own countries. So I'd like to thank again the panel in Cairo, the people who has been present here in Sharm, who has contributed with asking questions, and of course our German hosts who has been facilitating this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye, Nana. Bye, Mohammed. Bye, Mohammed.